Okay. All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Hey, Walaikum Salam. How are you?
Good, good. All right. So we got how do you want to be introduced?
However you feel like it.
My friend Diego on the
There you go.
podcast, episode whatever, I think I don't know, 14 or 15. So just due to time, I want to let's just get right into it.
Cool.
Um we met at one of a retreat, the Good Tree retreat.
Yes.
Um and where do I begin? The podcast is about spirituality, Islamic mysticism, I guess. I mean, I just that's what I put as on the bio of Instagram. But just spirituality, right?
Right.
And I've been going over the 99 names, which I need to actually get back into because I haven't done it in about a week and a half. Um, Tell me what's been your let me
Journey.
start. What's that?
You want to
Journey,
start
yeah. I don't know if I should start with your journey or let's just start with your journey, yeah. Because I
Yeah,
was
we'll
gonna
see
do
where
it
it goes.
reverse. Yeah.
We'll see where it goes. Um, so we met at the Good Tree Retreat and for the Good Tree Institute of Arizona. And I've been a part of Good Tree for, almost since its inception over 10 years ago. And but I guess my journey um it's hard to tell when it really started, because it's probably a lifelong journey since we were kids. Um, but in earnest, I think I can say that my journey started in college. You know, befriending someone, a good friend in college, going through experiences. Um,
Where did you grow up, by the way? Where were you born and where did you grow up?
so I was born in South America. I was born in Venezuela, in a city called Maracaibo, which is kind of similar to Houston in many ways. It's an oil city. It's flat. It's hot, humid, right by a big lake. And the state in which I grew in, called Zulia, is very similar to Texas, which is where I currently live, in many ways. And so I grew up there. My mom was from the East Coast. She was from Philadelphia. So we grew up kind of in a bilingual, bicultural family. And I studied
How old were you when you moved to the States?
19.
Okay.
So I came to study college. I graduated from high school. Then I did a year as an exchange student. Then I went back. I was supposed to come right away. I was a little homesick, so I stayed an extra semester. And and it's interesting how, in hindsight, all of that kind of led to one moment where I met someone who had already taken a class that I was starting to take, and I was struggling to understand some of the basic kind of concepts of it. And we met up coincidentally, at one place, and uh, we just started to talk, and he had already taken the class, and he reminded me a lot of my friends from Venezuela in terms of um, like friendliness and approach to people and stuff, um, and so we became instant friends. We've been friends ever since, and I live now in Dallas. He lives down in Houston. His name is Ahmed. He's Egyptian American. Right. So I think my journey started back then when we just had a lot of we spent a lot of time together because we were studying together. And we
Can I
connected.
ask real quick? Sorry I have a tendency to interrupt. I
No,
have
it's
to
okay. I
throw my
think
questions in
you
just
go
because
on.
stuff
Yeah.
is important. What was just real quick? What's your relationship with spirituality, God, all that stuff prior to college, growing up in Venezuela?
Um, it was there. Like I think it was always there. One of my sisters mentioned to me recently that she always viewed me as, the spiritual one. Um,
Mm.
and so I always had an interest in understanding the unseen. um, and whatever way I understood it then,
What's your
right?
earliest memory of that? Do you have earliest memory of being exposed to the unseen or thinking
I
about it?
Yeah, I remember friends talking about like metaphysics and stuff like that,
What
and
age?
at 7 maybe
Wow.
8,
See, that's kind of important, right? That kind of like that's the
yeah,
foundation. That's very early to be talking about metaphysics.
yeah,
Um,
and just being interested in like, oh wow, so there's like a whole realm of things that we can't see, but maybe you can have access to it. Like that
right.
type of stuff fascinating. Like I thought it was just fascinating as a kid,
Yeah.
you know.
How could you not?
Yeah, and so and I always like I enjoyed. We weren't like a heavy church going family, but I went to Catholic high school and I enjoyed the times where we did do something related to like a special occasion, a church or something that we had a church associated with a school, but it wasn't part of our day or our weekly practices, right? It was more focus on being good, focus on doing good, um, and then being connected, and then find your own way.
Oh, wow. That's pretty unique.
Yeah.
This
So
is at a Catholic school, like a private school.
this was within my family. So within the
Oh,
Catholic
gotcha,
school,
gotcha,
no,
gotcha.
they were Catholics, but they were pretty open. Like they
Okay,
weren't super strict, and
okay.
so
But
and
your
so I
family
appreciated
was
that.
pretty chill, pretty open.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
cool.
So I think that's why I said it's hard to say when it really started, but in terms of like discovering Islam, it was really in college where maybe in my last 2 years of college, that's when I started reading books and really engaging in conversations with my friend. And it wasn't really until after college that I graduated and I was living in Chicago that I became Muslim in 1998.
1998. Wow.
Yeah.
1998 is when my favorite movie came out, The Matrix
Oh, there you go.
and
Yeah. I
Blade.
stepped out of the matrix. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, all right. Wow. Where do we go from there? You tell
So,
me.
yeah.
What's the
So,
most important thing? Let's you have limited time because I'm working, you're working. Give us the good stuff. Tell us what's something that people you think people would want to hear, would need to hear.
yeah. So I think there's a couple things. One is that sometimes your kind of your path feels very lonely,
Mm,
and because the day to day can be like when I first became Muslim, there I'd see friends, I'd meet people, regularly, but you meet them for 3, 4 hours on a week, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, like there's all that time in between where you're trying to figure things out, right?
yeah,
Um, and
especially
so
for guys too. I mean, men tend to be very not that great at communicating, being talking about
I
emotions and
think so
stuff.
too. Yeah. And I think, everybody has a different experience becoming Muslim. Um, and definitely there are people that had a better experience than me, and then there are people that had a much, far
Yeah,
worse experience than me,
yeah.
in terms of like the social, you know, aspects of it. However, in hindsight, I can see how quickly I was really connected to really good people, um, and
When
like
you say good
how
people, what do you mean by that?
I was just connected with, just really amazing Muslims that helped me along the way and who are still really good. In fact, some of them are now family, you know. Um, and I've stayed connected with them, and now what seemed like it was just a friendship back then, has now become a 25-year kind of friendship, right?
Uh, I gotta ask more. When you say amazing, what do you mean by that? What makes them good? What makes them amazing?
People
Especially
that
for a new
influence me.
Muslim specifically.
Yeah, people that influence me in many ways to, keep a bigger picture in mind. They showed me how to, how to live a balanced life from the start. I could see like I had this natural inclination to not do something to an extreme, you know, um, not grow a full beard and change my clothing and
Right.
and
Which happens a lot
anybody
when somebody converts or reverts. They just go 0 to 100
they
real
can go
quick.
zero, and there are things that you want to go to like what you are capable of doing,
Hmm.
but then I connected with people who showed me that they were pursuing careers, that they were
I see.
interested in many things, and they lived a balanced life. They were able to
I
incorporate
see.
Islam into their life
I
without
see.
any real, and
You were around people that embodied balance.
yeah,
They were balanced in their own lives.
yep, yep, exactly. And so I could see, I'm like, oh, this is refreshing,
Hmm.
um, and I just kind of gravitated towards that group.
Yeah.
Um, and so um, and there were a lot of things happening in Chicago at the time, that I was able to connect with institutions that were starting out, people that were coming and had a chance to meet them and talk to them about their mistakes, when they become Muslim, and that really informed my trajectory going
You've
forward.
met some pretty major scholars and pretty big influencers in the Muslim community early on.
Yeah, early on,
Yeah.
like Dr. Omar Farooq Abdullah, when he came from Saudi Arabia, he went to Chicago, and um,
He's
some
awesome.
of the like the founders of when he came to there's an organization that was recently started for him called the Nawawi Foundation.
Hmm.
The Nawawi Foundation was started for him by some friends that I had met, right?
Gotcha.
Anas, Usman, and Osama, and so um, and Ashar Usman as well. So I connected to that group right away,
Yeah.
right? And it was just amazing. It was a very strong foundation, and also I had exposure to Islamic mysticism, Sufism, the history of Islamic Spain, and all of that from my very early years, right? And so
Nice.
um, so I felt like I was lucky,
Yeah.
people that
Blessed.
I met.
Blessed.
Yeah, I was blessed, alhamdulillah. And also, and this is where I look back and say, well, yeah, there were years for sure, where things got hard and and I felt lonely and all that kind of stuff. But when you really look, you see that Allah was there supporting me along the path,
Mm.
right?
What was it like for you, real quick? Let's just put it. I want to come back to where you're at in the timeline, but 98, you're learning about Islam, or it begins specifically with Islam, your spiritual journey. Although it sounds like it began when you were a kid, but um, and 9/11 happens, and 3 years later, right?
That's
And
correct.
then that must have played a pretty big role. The fact that um, you're still new to the community, to the everything, and then now you're, yeah, I mean, tell me about that.
Yes, in 9/11, 2001,
Hmm.
right? My wedding was 8/11, 2001,
All right.
right? And
Yeah, it's good that it
so
wasn't
our
10/11, 2001.
what's that?
It's good it wasn't 10/11, like a month later, a month
Yeah,
earlier.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was 8/11, 2001. And so a month later, we're newly married, we're in grad school in Michigan,
At that
and
time, you
9/11 happens.
considered you were identifying as a Muslim?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I was openly, Muslim. And but that, 9/11 happened. I was in an accounting class, and the news started. There's one person in the class who he was a MD, and he was getting his MBA, and he worked at Michigan, and he had a pager, but the pager had would send him news updates. So
Yeah.
he was the first one to get a page saying something happened, seemed like an airplane flew into one of the twin towers. And and long story short, we come out of the class, we're watching it on TV, and we see the second one, right? So it was that was one time in my life that I actually felt like not safe, like
As a
something.
Muslim.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like,
Also, real quick, for anyone who's confused about what a pager is, for all you young ones, that's the original text message tool.
right.
People don't know; they
Yeah,
never even heard of that. But
yeah.
okay, so you felt intimidated, right?
It was a weird
Yeah.
time for sure. Yeah, but
But
you
anyways, yeah.
anyways, yeah, but I think the lesson there is that everything passes and you see how things progress over time. And the worst didn't happen. Of course, a lot of things did happen after that. Horrible things, came from that. Um, but you grow, the community has continued to grow.
And
In
you were
fact, maybe it's accelerated.
being around the right people, you were not affected in a negative way by these misconceptions that maybe, you know, I would imagine somebody who's new to the community, their family, maybe they're like, yeah, okay, do this, we support you. And then all this negative, these lies that are being perpetuated, start to kind of bubble up. And, but, but anyways, let's
Yeah,
go back to the, okay. So, uh, you're getting exposed to some next level stuff, right? So you're meeting some scholars, you're meeting some people who are, um, well educated,
yeah,
right, and really walking the walk, right,
yeah,
really
yeah,
about it.
yeah.
And yeah, tell me about how, like, what is Islamic mysticism, what is Sufism, what, like, I mean, I've heard you say things at Good Tree that I was like, man, people need to hear this is, um but anyways,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, Sufism is a science of spirituality in Islam, right? And it used to be a practice in the time of the Prophet without a name. It's just how they were, But over time and through, there are people over time that are, they're inheritors of the Prophet in many ways. The scholars are inheritors of the Prophet, and so there are people over time that have whose job is to renew that sense of spirituality, right? And so Abu Habib al-Ghazali is the most famous example with a revival of Islamic sciences, for example, right? But you can go through and there are so many that we can list, right? But a science started to emerge over time of how to develop that sense of spirituality in Islam, right? And so that science then there are people who then codified it based on their understanding, and those became like paths, like tariqas, and a famous one, of course, you have the Shadili, Naqshbandi, um, but the one that I've become associated with is from within the Qadiri path. And Qadiri, as it's one of the books I recommended to you, um, are descendants of Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, right? One of the greatest Sufi masters of all time, right?
Mm.
So any descendant from him are considered Qadiris, right? Um, so Sufism is the science of following the practices, the prescribed practices, to attain that closeness to God. It's really to seek to purify yourself. As the Quran says, you will not attain to Allah except if you have a pure heart. Illa biqalbin salim. And so the process of purifying your heart through a daily rigor of practices is Sufism.
um the as far as the different pathways or channels, um, is and you said that you have one.
Mhm.
Is
Yeah.
that something that a person has to do? Is that like a choice that somebody makes based off like research or because that seems very like heady and a lot of it's like I don't know, that seems like a little bit complicated. But then you go right into like I guess it's just like picking how what's the yeah, just tell me about that because that just, um is that a
Yeah.
requirement? Is that something that you feel
It's not a
is
requirement. No, it's not a requirement. It's it's part of, you know, of something you select, right, to do. And
why
it's always
though?
been that way. It's always been that way. It's always been something that you choose to do. Um,
So it's a tradition.
I mean, it could be a tradition. Yeah. I mean, they're traditional practices, but there's also the renewal side of it that keeps it um, relevant for the time and place in which you live in, right? So the practices that were in place, 400 years ago may not be relevant today. Or parts of them might be, but other parts may not be, right? Um, and so the it's not obligatory on a Muslim to take on these extra practices, right? And so, but there's the Hadith Qudsi where the Prophet peace be upon him is speaking, but not on his own behalf, saying that that a servant does all his extra uh, like acts of worship until Allah loves them. And when Allah loves them, then He becomes the eyes with which He sees and the ears with which He listens, and that the hands with it which He
Mhm.
works, etc. Right? So you become one, right? And um, it's not obligatory. There's plenty of examples of companions that said, if I do these five things that you're telling me to do, well, I'll make it to paradise. And Prophet said, if you do those five things, you'll make it to paradise, right? There are others who said, all I know is that I love you more than I love anybody else, right? Even though they had addictions and they had other things that they were dealing with. And then the Prophet said, leave that person alone because he loves me more than he loves his own self, right? And so the path to Allah, because He is infinite, the paths to Him are infinite.
So what I'm getting from that is don't get caught up in that. Don't get too caught up or lost because I think that could be somebody could get kind of lost in the weeds there, right? They can get um caught up in thought knots, logic knots in their mind,
Yeah,
and get lost in the technicality of I don't know, just stuff
yeah,
that makes things that it just takes a person away from where they're trying to
but
get to, which is a
yeah,
place of
yeah. You got
peace
to keep
and
it simple. You got to keep it
yeah,
very
simple.
simple.
Yeah.
For me, it
So
was after being Muslim for a couple of years. I felt that I remember I'd ask people, when I first became Muslim, hey, when you pray, what do you feel? And they're like, I don't feel anything. I'm like, oh, that's so weird. So I'd go and ask another person, like, hey, when you pray, what do you feel? Like, I don't feel anything. I just pray. Right. And after a while, I was like, I'm not feeling anything when I pray, and I should.
that's
Like,
a
if
thought that
I
you
really,
eventually had yourself.
well, it was something where, because I was struggling with it. I was like, how do I connect? How do I connect? How do I connect? If I'm praying, how do I connect beyond the movements, beyond, the knowing that, hey, I'm doing this and this is working in the unseen for me and helping me, but how do I connect?
Hmm.
Right. And
So
so,
and that was correct me if I'm wrong when you said you were 7 and that curiosity, that openness, uh, and that little feeling of oh I like that. I want to get close to that. And then you go to college and life happens. But it sounds like you got to a point where there was still some desire for a longing for more,
Right.
that
Yep.
you felt like you hadn't really arrived to where you're looking to get to. Is that right? And
Right.
how
Yeah.
old were you, by the way, at this point, where you kind of come to this kind of
Um, Late 20s, early 30s.
okay,
It's
gotcha.
hard to remember, but yeah, I think, when you become a Muslim, that's the end of one journey and the beginning of another one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it is a never-ending journey. Like, I do have an image of myself as, an 85, 90-year-old person, and how I want that to look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, in terms of my connection to the Quran, my connection to Allah, what I've been able to leave behind, like it's a very vivid image of where I want to get to. And that keeps me going because I'm not there, and so if that's going to take me another 35 years, 40 years to get there. Well, I got 35 years, so anything I start now, I can say, when I'm 90, well, I've been doing it for
Yeah.
40 plus years, right? And so, um,
So you're starting to look inward and ask yourself, why am I not really feeling something?
yeah, yeah. Why am I not, when I finish or when I'm in my prayer, why did I get so distracted? Or
Mm,
why is it, and that is the struggle. I mean, that is the struggle, even today, I can go in and pray and come out of prayer and be like, wait, did I just pray? Like, did I just pray?
mm,
Like I feel like I just went through the motions, right? And didn't connect and just fulfilled an obligation and moved on to the
yeah.
next thing, right?
Pretty hollow.
Yeah, it can be pretty hollow, right? And a lot of that has to do with um, you know, not getting myself ready for the prayer, not trying to connect to what I'm reading, um, having
It's
something
a
else
lack
in
of
mind.
mindfulness. That's what people talk about mindfulness. That's what it's being present, being that's all it is. Like just
Yeah.
doing what you're doing and actually doing it
Yeah. And
completely.
there are ways to like elevate that, aside from the practice of mindfulness. Like, but they're, being conscious of in your wudu, being careful in your wudu, when you're
Yeah.
doing it before,
Well,
reciting something new.
I say mindfulness because it's a buzzword that people
Right.
kind of assume that is, you know, separate from Islam.
Right.
But it sounds like
Yeah.
what you're saying, the underlying theme is that there's a sub layer, a deeper layer of this more of a heartfelt connection or a science of cultivating that connection
Yeah.
in which would lead to a more present state, a more emotional, spiritual, heartfelt experience in the daily routines of
Yeah.
rituals.
And, and you feel that, like, and that takes us back to the practice of Sufism, right? Um, you feel it when, sometimes when you go to a place and you pray behind someone who is very steeped in spirituality, and not just spirituality, but and spirituality and Sharia go hand in hand, right? The laws and the spirituality, they go hand in hand. They complement each other. Um, one would say that spirituality completes, the Sharia, right? The laws.
One thing
Um,
you'd said in at the retreat was this misconception. I think it was a private conversation we were having between one of the classes or something like that. You said that Sufism is not this. People have this idea that it's this unhinged, free flowing, no rules, no discipline, no structure dancing thing. But you said it's the outward and the inward. It's following the rules, the structure, the discipline of the outer world, as well as cultivating the inner world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the greatest, masters, the shuyukh have always been masters of Sharia. You know, they're masters of that before they were masters of the spiritual domain, right? Because that's like that sets the boundaries. Like spiritually, you might be having a certain experience. Physically, in the physical world, you have to be guided by the rules and principles of Islam, right? Um, and that's a whole different topic. But you have to have that
What's
connection
your
to what to
I
the
know, I know.
practice.
I think we all know what a person misses out on if they're only focused on the outer world and right and praying on time, but even though they're not feeling anything, just doing it mindlessly. Um, what a person misses out on, right?
Yeah,
What about the other side? What if a person is solely focused on their whatever spiritual connection, this kind of just that this intangible thing, and not the outer world? Why is that so bad? What does a person lack or miss out on with that, in your opinion?
in my opinion, well, I mean, it's hard to judge, right? But I think that if a person claims to be connected to God, but then claims that it doesn't need prayer, then there's a dissonance right there. This the disconnect
What if
of
someone
what they're
says, well,
saying.
no, God is everywhere, God knows that I love him, God knows, why do I have to?
Yeah. If you love me, then follow me and my prophet. Like those are the commands, right? Um, and you know, um, if if you love God, then you will find out what God wants from you. God,
So
absolutely, God loves you for sure. God loves his entire, he's out of his mercy, he sent down one portion, 100th of his mercy to us, right? And he's retaining 99. And that is the mercy that we see in all of humanity, right? So, um,
so it sounds like you're saying that the physical manifestation or the physical world, outer world, is a manifestation of of love, of true, of that deeper connection. It's like an
absolutely.
inevitable outcome.
It has to be, right? Otherwise, you're causing damage. If someone, let's say that what you're saying is true, that you are so connected to God that you are beyond prayer, beyond fasting, beyond giving zakat, um, and so, and you're
Wait,
free of that.
you said that if a person is beyond that, like, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, like in your example, I'm so connected to someone
Oh,
will
yeah,
say, I'm
yeah,
so connected to God that I don't need that, right?
yeah,
God is everywhere. So everything I do is prayer, right?
yeah, right.
So you already have the dissonance that we talked about where you're not practicing what the prophets who are the most beloved
Hmm.
did and taught us to do, but then someone else comes along as well and sees you and says, oh yeah, I feel that way too, abandons prayer, right? Now you're kind of perpetuating something that's bad. Like you're having a bad impact on the world. You should have a good impact on the world, right? You should bring people closer to God.
What how do you define prayer? Like, what does that word actually mean to you?
So salah and dua are because prayer kind of in English can be both, right? There's the supplications, then there's a prayer. But salah, you know, it's it's my daily connection. Like it's my daily structure. Um, if it's off for whatever, if I sleep through Fajr or something like that, I feel like my day's not right, you know? Um, and so, and, it's an opportunity for me to connect and
Mm,
really lay everything there for me for Allah, like
an
you have five
opportunity.
times.
I like that. It's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity, yeah, to just put it all out, because we're all
Hmm.
struggling with different things,
Hmm. Hmm.
and um, on a daily basis, you get to just put it, give it back to Allah and ask for guidance, And I think there are a lot of missed opportunities for me, personally in prayer, where it isn't that, it hasn't been that, where, I'm in between meetings and I have to find a place to pray, and in the office when we're there. Um, and it's just in and out, I'm not thinking about it. And that's a missed opportunity, you know. Um, so uh, but now it's such a part of alhamdulillah, it's such a part of who I am that there are times where I'm going to bed and I'm like, something's wrong. Like, what's wrong? I'm like, oh my God, then pray Isha. I get up, pray Isha, go back to bed, and I fall asleep. Um, so yeah, so for me, it's an opportunity.
I
And do
wonder
I?
if we could even just replace. I might just in my mind start to replace the word prayer with opportunity, right? And say, my goal is to hit all five of my opportunities,
Right.
right? I mean that
Yeah.
just changes the whole vibe of it, the feeling of it. That's
Yeah.
really what it is, though.
Yeah. You're handing out, like you're just giving back, like, hey, I'm struggling with this, help me,
Yeah,
or you're making five deposits into your akhirah, into your hereafter, from your dunya, right?
an opportunity is what you make of it.
Yeah,
It's just there for the taking.
it is. Yeah, it's very
I have
exactly.
to I have to stop this and then reopen. Are you still okay on time?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so it'll end up in about a minute.
Yeah,
Um, but I want to, well, there's a couple things. The heart, softening of the heart. What does that actually mean? What does that look like? What is the relationship between that and Islam? Um, and also, we were talking other day about living in this world, right? Being in corporate America or any industry, it's all corporate. I mean, even if you're in
right.
healthcare, it's all insurances or insurance or companies are all corporate. Uh, Being in this world and still doing that when it's a very competitive, toxic world.
Yeah,
So let me stop this and then let's come back in a second. All right.
yeah.
Softening of
So
the
the
heart. What is
softening of the
that?
heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think of things that are soft, these are things that usually can,
Puppies, blankets, pillows.
yeah, these are things that can absorb, can take in something. They can take different shapes without breaking. You know, um, something that's soft may not hurt if you get hit by it, right? Something that's hard will. Something a tree that's dried up and it's hard will break in the first, in the storm, right? Whereas one that's flexible, the wind will blow and like the hail will come and everything. But if it's got firm roots and it's flexible, it might lose a branch here and there, but overall, the tree's not going to fall, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the heart is similar, right? Um, and so
In what
it,
way? What do you mean by that? It's similar
well, a
in that
heart that's,
it's more adaptable or resilient. The more
I think a heart that is hard, will tend to snap, will tend to break things, will tend to be more aggressive when it doesn't have to be.
Mm.
Um, you know,
Suffering.
yeah, it will cause suffering. Will be, you know, kind of like a dead branch, Um, and so the interest in softening the heart is that you become more beneficial to the world, right? For yourself first and foremost, and then for the world, because you're able to deal with things, in a softer way. That doesn't mean, and I know we've talked about this briefly, but that doesn't mean that you're a pushover. That doesn't mean that people can do with you whatever they want, right? It's just that you are approaching a situation without that hardness in your heart, you know, without, and if you think of I don't know, the image that comes to my mind. This may not be a perfect analogy, but a sponge, right? If there's something stuck inside a sponge and the sponge is dry, like how do you get it out? You know, like if there's some, I don't know, but if you soften it with water and you put soap and you squeeze it and all that kind of stuff, now you can start cleaning it up, right? Um,
Hmm.
the heart is the same way, right? So you want to purify your heart. You want to work on purifying your heart. Um, and believe it or not, that's going to give you the guidance to know when you need to be firm, when you need to be soft, because being soft, having a soft heart doesn't mean being soft, all the time. It just means that the way that you're looking at the world is different than someone who comes in with this harsh view.
Yeah, I mean, being like assertiveness is not aggressiveness. Assertiveness can be an act of love, right? Like
Right.
setting a boundary with someone could be and that can enhance the relationship with a person,
Yeah,
even though
exactly.
it might come off as aggressive, but it's you're just standing up for yourself.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like you see Malcolm X, the way that he spoke was very,
Mm-hmm.
very assertive, very confident, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, you know, if you see his journey, I mean, definitely his journey was of softening of the heart constantly, right? Um, and I've seen it. I've seen people who, the some of my trips I came across, but someone who I know very well, very deeply spiritual guy, person, and I saw him react to a situation with what seemed like anger, right? And he was yelling no, not yelling, but speaking loudly to a group of people very forcefully because they weren't doing their jobs, right? And then I was in the room and I was like, oh, I better get out of here. When I was leaving, he sensed and he stopped and he said, don't leave. When I turned around, he had this big smile on his face, right? And so he said, no, no, come here. We're okay. We're all family. We're all family. Don't worry about it. Just for learning how to do this. But it was like instant, you know, like what the situation called for at that moment was for him to be assertive and
Mm-hmm.
like getting things in action, and
Yeah.
getting people to pay attention to what he was saying. But then, for me, it would have taken like I would have still been red, of anger, right? But for him, it was just what the situation called for, and he was able to immediately adjust, right, to kindness and
One thing I think about is a lot of Muslims come from countries, backgrounds where there's a lot of trauma, intergenerational trauma, um, various obstacles, and and so that affects people's perspective, coping skills, how they interface with the world, right? And and that can, I think, get passed down in family from generation to generation. Um, and so I feel like it's hard, or it can be hard for some people to pursue that softness of the heart when the world has historically been so hard on them, right? I mean, you mentioned Malcolm X. That's a prime example of that. Um, but that's why he's like kind of he's a legend, right?
Right.
Because he was pursuing that balance of yeah. What
Yeah.
is the relationship between, like, what's the science? You said that Sufism is a science of softening of the heart, right? So what is it that does it?
Well, I think we all have trauma that we deal with that are, passed down from our parents and from our experiences. Some have it more than others, for sure. But I think we're all tested. We got
Mm,
to remember that a test may come in the form of something that seems hard, of a hardship, or something that comes very easily, which is like could be money, right?
mm,
Both of those are tests. That's in the Quran. You know that um, that you're tested one way, and you say, "Well, Allah has honored me." You test it another way, and you say, "Allah has really tested me," right? But they're both tests, and I would even say that the harder test is the one where you have plenty. Um,
mm,
that's a harder test because you don't realize it that you're in a test. Um, the other one is very clear that you're in a test, and you don't. It's harder to realize that it's a blessing. You know. Um,
mm,
so I mean, what does it? Well, it's for me. It goes back to finding a true master of the path. For me personally, finding someone who um, is trained and recognized and authorized to be a doctor of the heart. Just like you go to a medical doctor here if you have a condition,
mm,
you find someone who you can go to who can prescribe, the the practices that you do on a daily basis to soften your heart um, and to purify yourself, right? So, but it's it's all in the Quran and Sunnah, of doing not just the obligatory things, but always trying to do something extra, like and little by little, like you just pick something that you want to do that's extra, and just do that little thing every day. After a little while, that's going to become so easy that then you can add something else.
mm,
And initially, that's going to seem hard, but then it's going to become easy. And whether it's reading two ayahs from the Quran every day, you know, you can read that. It might be a struggle if your Arabic isn't that great, but you listen to it, you find someone who can teach you how to connect the letters and all that kind of stuff. And then two ayahs then become four, then become five, then become a page, then become 2 pages, right? Next thing you know, you're reading 5 pages a day. Next thing you're reading 10, or now you're reading 20, which is a
mm,
30th of the Quran, right? You build on it, right? But you want to start with something small that you're doing it just to become close to Allah. And it could be something as simple as I'm gonna focus on my wudu. I'm just not gonna be mindless of my wudu. Or I'm not praying. I'm gonna start praying Fajr. I'm gonna start praying Isha, you know, or I'm gonna do one or the other every other day, something like that. And then that just becomes a habit. And then you're like, okay, I'm gonna do both. Okay, I'm gonna do three. I'm gonna do five of them, right?
and what is that doing though to someone?
Well, it's an experience. I think you start experiencing life inside of that structure. You start letting that work on you, right? So um
So is it like more opportunities, right?
opportunities, to feel happier, right? to feel more relaxed, to not feel so alone, to not have so much anxiety, you know, to start seeing the miracles that happen in your life that you're not even aware of, you know.
So
Um,
it's really it's just putting the effort in. It's putting the effort in and just chipping away little by little. And um yeah, and just doing it.
yeah.
Dude, I know you have to go soon. You mentioned something I thought was really interesting. I still want to ask you about like working the corporate world, working in this in our just society. You said something like the corporate world is a great spiritual um
Yeah. Training ground.
training ground.
Yeah. It's like a boot camp. And I know a lot of people probably have the opposite view that the corporate world
Yeah,
can crush your soul, and it can. I'm not
yeah,
saying that it's a religious,
right,
spiritual place,
right,
but it's because it can crush your soul that it becomes a kind of like the battleground for the Sufi, for the spiritual person, if you will, or for it becomes a place for you to really practice what you preach, and so and the reason is that there are very few people who set out to accomplish something in their careers and they go way beyond their wildest imaginations, right?
right.
Of a company of 35,000 employees, one makes it to CEO,
Yeah,
you know, and if you spend your whole career at that company, you might get to see two or three CEOs, period, right? Out of thousands and thousands, right? Very few make it to like the senior most VP
yeah.
levels, right? So stuff happens along the way that is can be hard, right? And you have personalities, you have other things that can be very difficult to deal with. And so how you handle that on a day to day basis, you know, becomes an opportunity for you to grow spiritually if you take it as that. Otherwise, it can be can be a kind of a soul crushing place, right? That doesn't mean that you have to stay at a place that is mistreating you. I'm just saying
Yeah, it's not
that the
like
things that come along the way are
yeah,
opportunities for growth.
we're not you're not saying that a person should tolerate or accept like an abusive environment, but that
Right.
uh things an environment that is I was thinking about my own journey and like being in LA. It's like the most toxic place in the world, they say, and that's where I had my real spiritual uh path, or that's where it started. Because of exactly that, like that a toxic environment can really just break you down so far and break that shell that the ego just collapses, I think, and you feel people can hit their rock bottom, and that's from a person's rock bottom. That's where what is a quote about that? Like it's through the cracks that the light is able to shine through.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think so too. I mean, I think you just live, you go through experiences, things don't go the way that you want them to go. But then you have faith, that Allah is gonna make it right and that Allah can change anything. You just got to keep working and looking at what's next and how to do what you're doing better and learn from it and be patient, you know?
Going back to, and we're gonna wrap up in a couple minutes. Where is that 7-year-old Diego? Is he still there? Curious? Has his curiosity been satisfied? Um,
Yeah, it's a great question. And it kind of reminds me of Cat Stevens slash Yusuf Islam,
mhm,
that his songs before he became Muslim were amazing because you could get a sense that he was searching, right?
mhm,
And the songs after he became Muslim, um, I love him, but I prefer his older songs because it's when one he was searching and the other one it seems like he's giving answers, right? Um, Whereas for me, I feel like you never quite arrive. You know,
Yeah.
maybe I'm at a point where I've lived experiences and I've learned enough things where I can help others along
Mhm.
their path while knowing that, you know, it's it's it
Is it
continues.
is it still do you still have a sense of wonder and awe
Yeah, absolutely.
of the unseen
Every time,
realm?
every time I there are people that I meet and then suddenly I'm like, wow, like this person is amazing, or there's an experience that I have, and that leaves me wanting to understand more.
Hmm.
Um, and really, I mean, I pray that my journey doesn't end until my last breath. Like I'm still looking to find something new, find something a new understanding
Yeah.
of Allah, the Prophet, until we meet, you know, and we haven't met yet. Um, I'm going to try to just keep going, and like I said, you gotta, with every step that you take, you become stronger.
Hmm.
And every time you become stronger, you can do something better. Right.
Hmm.
And you have setbacks. You definitely have setbacks. I think the physical journey of staying and being in good health is a good analogy because you go through all phases, right?
Hmm.
You gain weight, you lose weight, you're in shape, you're out of shape, you're happy, you're depressed. Like these things just keep happening, right?
Right.
But you just keep going and committed to being in good health.
Yeah.
Eventually you get there, and eventually you start feeling stronger and that you can do things
uh,
better, enjoy them
there's this
more.
therapy intervention I like called ACT, and it's a value based intervention, and it's all about using identifying what you value and letting that be the your north star, letting that guide you. And values aren't the same thing as goals. Goals are attainable. You can
Yeah,
goal A goal is marriage, right? You can just pursue it and you can get it. A value is a love. You can always move towards that.
yeah,
And it sounds like you're very value driven. Like that, there's a value there of
yeah. I mean, if you
following
think
your
about it,
heart. Uh,
yeah, the 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 most important dhikr you can do is La ilaha illallah and just keep saying it over and over. Same word, same words, right? La ilaha illallah over and over, over and over, over and over. And
yeah.
you might wonder, like, well, why? Why over and over and over? And it's because the meanings are infinite. The experiences are infinite. The steps you take to Allah, He's both right there with you, but He is infinite,
Mm,
right? And so with each step that you take, you become closer and closer and closer, and you can discover something new. Something um becomes a reality as opposed to a concept. And an example is I recently um my alarm didn't go off and I didn't wake up in time for Fajr, right? And so I woke up and I'm like, oh God, I did wudu, and I said, okay, I can just pray through this quickly, or I can pray like I mean it. Like
yeah.
I can pray through it just to make it up, or I can pray
Right.
like have an intention, right? So I started praying Al-Fatiha, and then I read Al-Hakmu Takathur, Hatta Surtumul Maqabir, right? Um, the you're engrossed in the pursuit of accumulating more and more and more and more until you reach the graves, right?
Hmm.
And I literally, like, I could feel this 6 feet deep, maybe 10 feet long, 4 feet wide hole on the ground that had my name on it.
Wow.
Right? That was waiting for me. Right.
Ooh.
And then I thought, well, everybody has that.
Mm-hmm.
And that hole is either waiting to welcome you, embrace you, or not. Right. And it became very real for me. Like just the an ayah surah that we've covered and seats of wisdom retreats with Good Tree many times. I've recited it many times. That day it became real, right? On a
Wow.
prayer that I slept through,
Right.
right? Like I didn't even pray it on time. I woke up, I was like, oh shoot, subhanAllah.
Yeah.
Let me hurry up and you know, and it became real, and now that's for me, you got to guard it because these things can be lost, but it's a reality, right? That's how I feel about those ayahs. Um,
Wow.
and so
Wow.
that comes through, the diligence of every day sitting down and having your set, athkar that you do, that
Mm-hmm.
suddenly something connects, right? Connects for you. And now it's real. It's not just something that's kind of a concept or a good idea.
Amazing. Thank you so much, man. This has been really fantastic.
It's been fun.
So honored to talk to you, and I feel so just real blessed that just to hear you talk about your personal journey and everything. It's really a true blessing, and I'm very honored, and so thank you very much. Jazakallah, man. I
Well, no,
know
thank you
you got
and
to
good
go
luck
back to
with.
work, but so we'll
Yeah,
log
yeah.
off.
Yep. And you, thank you for inviting me and good
Of
luck with
course.
everything. And we'll stay in contact.
Yeah, yeah. Inshallah. All right. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. So
No, it's not.